All right, so we're streaming, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn the broadcast on right now.
Okay. Okay. Welcome. So I'll call the meeting to order, and then you give your announcement.
Yes, please.
Okay, we're going to call to order the Infrastructure Committee meeting for May the 6th, 2020. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Before I call roll, I would like to make an announcement to the committee regarding the teleconferencing of this meeting. Prior to roll call, I would like to make it clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that the governor has issued 2 executive orders relaxing the requirements pertaining to remote meetings under the Brown Act. To facilitate social distancing and to slow the spread of the coronavirus pandemic, the executive orders authorize state and local legislative bodies, including this committee, to hold public meetings by teleconference more easily. These provisions will remain in effect during the period in which state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing measures. The order allows the committee to proceed with its members participating electronically or telephonically. Committee members are no longer required to be physically present in a meeting in order to participate or to establish a quorum. The agency must provide a means for the public to observe the meeting and to provide the public an opportunity to comment electronically or telephonically. The opportunities for public observation and participation must be and have been included in the meeting notice. The procedures adopted for this meeting have been established to meet or exceed the standards set forth in the order. For more information, please refer to Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-25-20. I will now take roll, after which I would like the chair to recognize me again in order to confirm certain matters for the record. Vice Chair Safar.
Here.
And Chair Perkins.
Here.
I have 3 questions for the committee members. I will ask all 3 questions, and if the answer is yes to all 3, please say yes and raise your hand. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Have you been able to hear all previous speakers, including the roll call, clearly? And are you satisfied based on facial or voice recognition or otherwise that everyone here representing themselves to be a committee member is actually the person they are representing themselves to be?
Yes.
Yes.
The record should reflect that I have received affirmative answers from each committee member present to all 3 questions. And I finally would like to advise the committee that any votes taken during this meeting must be taken by roll call. Thank you.
Okay. So item 2, minutes. Sabina, any comments on the minutes?
No, we can move to approve the minutes.
Yeah, minutes are approved. Public comment. I'm looking at the 15 participants that I see, and I don't see any of the general public.
To
Did I
attend.
miss anything there, Madam Clerk, or who are we talking to? Debbie.
The
Any,
two
There are 2 attending.
The 2 attendings are Jennifer Patchen and Jeanette Fuentes. So
Oh,
city
okay.
staff.
All right, so they're not public either. All right, good. All right, back to new business 4.1, draft 5-year pavement management program. And that's got to be Robin and Maria and anybody else that likes pavement like I do.
Good afternoon. Let me just adjust things a little bit here. I have a brief PowerPoint before I get started. I just want to point out that I'm being a little bit of a literal talking head here today, and there's a lot of hard work been going on with staff that's described in the staff report. And so I wanted to give a shout out to Daniel and Susie and Gloria and Raul and Jesus, who've been doing a lot of work to not only keep the program going, but bringing in design in-house and keeping going with that during this condition that we're all working with. Also, and let me start this slideshow here. And I'm not able to, some glitches here. Am I able to share this screen with you?
There we go.
All right, and
We are.
hopefully you can all see that. So this year is also a little bit different from previous years for a number of reasons. There's quite a bit of uncertainty going forward in the next few years, which means that our 5-year projection and all the list of streets does have a little more potential for change than it normally does. However, let me dive into it and give you an overview of where we are. So this is our typical summary. As you see that we're currently at an average PCI of 79. Our collector streets are doing a little bit better than that at 80, and our arterials are at 77. However, there will be a fair amount of upcoming work on our arterials, so hopefully we'll see some improvement there. Long-term projection, this goes out 10 years. We're currently at 79. If we are able to complete our TRIP funding and get a little bit of surge of work in the next year, we should see a bump up to 80, and then we'll be on a long-term downward trend towards 70 over the next 10 years. And just a reminder of the kinds of things we're talking about in terms of the treatment. When we have pavement in good condition, up in the 80s, more likely up even into the 90s, we may just be focusing on crack seal. And crack sealing is also a preventative maintenance operation that will continue throughout the life of pavements. As the pavements begin to deteriorate, we look at more substantial maintenance, which we are typically describing as a light maintenance would be a slurry seal. As the amount of dig outs increase, that may start to be considered a more heavy maintenance. And then we'd start transitioning into cape seals and thin overlays. It starts becoming light rehabilitation with thin overlays. So the heavier overlays, we're considering that a heavy rehabilitation, and then we get into full reconstruction. Going along with that is a cost factor. The most cost-effective pavement maintenance operation we have is the crack sealing. Then we get increased cost with the application of the slurry seals. That of course goes up as we need more dig outs to make them work. Then yet more cost for the rubberized cape, more cost still for the heavy or the light rehabilitation, and then the heavy rehabilitation. So this gets back to talking about our critical path network, our critical path process here for critical point process for maintaining the roads. And as we cross each one of those lines in the condition, we see a considerable increase in the cost, and hence the mantra we try to live by, which is keep the streets in good condition rather than letting them cross that line. So maximize the amount of preventative maintenance. So as I mentioned, we're looking at quite a few challenges and quite a bit of uncertainty this year. There's a lot of sources for that. One of them, of course, is the current COVID-19 health emergency, and that can have a number of impacts from delaying the ability of us to get design packages out, increased safety measures that could result in increased costs from our contractors, as well as other impacts in just getting things done. However, there's a number of others. One thing that we're dealing with is trying to integrate the COP one of the provisions of that ties in with the bike lanes. So there's a desire to do some bike lane work, and that was identified as a potential COP project. However, we don't want to be putting nice new bike lanes down on streets that need upcoming maintenance. So we may need to move things around a little bit and either use some COP money for some pavement and then later use some pavement money for bike lanes, or change around some of the timing of some of our streets to make sure that we're able to accommodate that work.
Robin, in the fact that we have very little traffic around town, are we going to see that the streets won't deteriorate quite so quickly? I mean, it may be imperceptible, I guess, but is that a factor at all?
No, I don't think that will be a factor. It would be an important factor if we're able to get everything done and get things under construction, that it should make doing the work easier. And certainly Caltrans has been able to bring forward some of their projects on the freeways in order to take advantage of the low traffic. In terms of the actual impact on wear and tear, because most of our traffic is light vehicles, I think the pavement impact will be minimal. We get most of our deterioration through garbage trucks and heavy vehicles, delivery trucks. That with the increased amount of delivery service, that may actually make things slightly worse, and environmental degradation.
Okay, thank you.
So we're juggling things around a little bit to make best use of COP. We also have the TRIP process moving forward. So we're looking to borrow $8 million from the Measure J funds. 4 million of that would be for cash flow for the bridge project to allow that to proceed in as quickly as possible. And the other 4 million would be for pavement projects. That injection of funds will hopefully allow us to do as much preventative maintenance as possible in the Doherty Valley area before those roads deteriorate to needing the next more expensive treatment.
Robin,
that will, of course, result. Yes.
Sorry, I have a quick question. When you say borrow, does that mean you then pay it back to that?
That's right. So those will be paid back with the funds from the Measure J, meaning a loss in cash flow in future years.
Oh.
And that has all been taken into account in the current projections that you see.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Additional considerations that are, of course, taken into account and are relatively more routine is trying to juggle streets to make sure that we catch as many aging streets before they move past that critical point. There's a good deal amount of uncertainty in cost. Costs have been going up quite a lot recently. We'll see what the current economic situation does. It's possible that if there's just continued demand for pavement, that we could see costs continue to increase, and that there's additional burden associated with safety elements that needed to be added in to account for the health precautions. On the other hand, the cost of oil has dropped dramatically, and that may result in a decrease in costs for asphalt. And in addition, if the general economy slows down, we could see some relief from the construction costs. Bike lanes, we continue to incorporate that to the maximum extent possible. We're also seeing a lot of costs in the current year's design, as well as in some of our upcoming projects for meeting ADA requirements, as we take care of more streets that require asphalt work and or are in the older part of town. That triggers requirements to upgrade curb ramps, and that's quite expensive. Low PCI streets, as always, is a continued factor in deciding which streets we will do. Out in future years, if we do start to see a substantial deterioration in the PCI, that'll add another factor because it'll be a increased proportion of the roads we do, and will start to inhibit our ability to do the critical point process. But that really won't be a major factor for quite some time. Another uncertainty which will start to figure into things within the next 5 years is green infrastructure. The Regional Water Quality Control Board is continuing to focus heavily on that. We expect as the new permit comes into effect, we will be required to implement green infrastructure within this time frame. Of course, we're looking for measures for compliance that do not tap into our pavement dollars, but that will become increasingly difficult. So we're going to have to continue to either anticipate that this will detract from our pavement funds, or keep the pressure on for finding alternative compliance through things like community finance districts where there's areas of new development, or other financing opportunities. Speaking of opportunities, we are looking at the TRIP financing that will really help with cash flow in the near future if we can get all of that in place. That cash flow, again, as I mentioned, is very important to help keep the good pavements in good condition and do a surge of preventative maintenance before the Doherty Valley streets start to age. Not shown in much of our analysis is a return of these borrowed TRIP funds from the bridge. If we're able to successfully get the bridge constructed in the current projected budget, then that may free up some of those funds to be returned to pavement management in 3 or 4 years' time, in which case we could see a uptick in our PCI of 1 or more points. A number of these opportunities are things that we've started to do recently, where we're acting as a general contractor and letting separate contracts for the slurry seal, for the asphalt work, and for the concrete work. That's more work on our staff, but it's so far showing returns. Bringing design in-house is a similar effort. We've been able to move some staffing around to accommodate doing that work, and we believe it will be a cost-effective way to move forward in the future for at least our routine projects. As mentioned, we tried out the rubberized cape last year. That went down very successfully. So far, it continues to look very good and perform well. Of course, it takes many years to really see what the long-term performance is, but so far, so good. We'll also continue to look for opportunities from grants. There has been some talk about stimulus funding for projects. If that's the case, we will aggressively pursue that to see if we can get our share of money for pavement.
I believe, at least I think I sent out an email asking for how much money we've gotten in non-recurring funds over the last 6 years. Things like OBAG grants and things like that. So sometime in the near future, if you could give us a list of how much money we've gotten for grants in the past.
Yes, I can provide such a list off the top of my head. The big one that's coming up where we'll actually have the money to spend is about, I believe it's $1.4 million that is associated with the upcoming Alcosta project.
Right. The reason I mention that is you're exactly right. If we rely strictly on our recurring funds, our PCI will slowly deteriorate. But over the years, we've gotten, I mean, those were Tiger grants, and we've had all kinds of you know, these are one-off things, but they've added substantially to our funds available for pavement projects. The other thing I would like to see is a chart that you've got the chart of 10 years looking into the future of our PCI. I'd like a chart that shows going backwards at least 6 years, because my recollection is we've been able to stay above at or above 78 pretty consistently. And I want to have that as perspective going forward.
Yes, we can provide both of those items, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end here. There's a number of factors that we can discuss with regard to where we are and where we're going.
Right.
So this map just gives a overview of the areas where we're planning to do work in the next 5 years. As consistent with our method, we are applying the critical point methodology, but we do try and group the streets into geographic areas because that gives us a lot of cost effectiveness. The contractor's not moving all over the place and can focus on just getting work done. However, that does introduce a little bit of variability relative to this diagram. Not every street in every area is in the same condition. And as we move into design and get additional information on the streets, sometimes we change the treatment type, and depending on what we're doing, that may change when it's done. One of the things I'd like to point out in this map is the streets in red that are labeled 2020. That is our current design effort that's underway. And what we are doing right now is we are designing the streets for the CIPs that are 2020 and 2021, with our objective, if we're able to get the cash flow of paving them both in year 2020. And the logic behind that is that the primary streets for the current year's project, the CIP 2020, are asphalt projects. So we want to go through and get all the asphalt projects done, but while we have an asphalt paving contractor here, also have them do the asphalt dig out work for 2021, which is primarily a preventative maintenance project. So we'd like to have them go through, do the streets for 2020, pave those streets, help prep the streets for the 2021 project. The 2021 project will then be slurry seals and rubberized capes. If we can't get the cash flow or we run out of good weather, then the 2021 project will move into 2021. Also shown in 2021 is the Alcosta Boulevard project. So there'll be quite a bit going on in 2021 out on the streets if we do both projects in 2021. Other projects that are upcoming is the Crow Canyon Road project. That's of course not strictly a pavement management project, that's the widening, but it does have a pavement improvement project associated with it. There will be substantial reconstruction of the existing pavement as well as the widening. And then we move into some more preventative maintenance type work in the Doherty Valley. And then in future years, shift back to this side. Again, it's a little more on the preventative maintenance. Then back to Old Ranch Summit area, more on the asphalt. We are trying to do a little bit of Crow Canyon Road with this year's work. The approach into town to the west of Bollinger is in pretty bad shape. So we'll see if we can get that work done with this year's project. And then out in 2025, again, we're back into the Doherty Valley as well as some work in the San Ramon Valley area.
As usual, I believe you guys have always created a package, and then you had a couple of, if the price was right, a couple of additional additive programs. Is that correct?
That is correct. And this year, that piece of Crow would be one of them. We're also looking to potentially add some of the work that is in the Old Ranch Summit area, because we will be doing work on Old Ranch Road itself. So we're going to be right there. And those streets, some of those streets have also had some prep work that was done recently, and they had the impacts from the waste management hydraulic spill that we mentioned in the report.
Yeah, thanks.
So this map's the same thing, but it breaks it down into more the type of maintenance. The light green those are the best streets. So that's where we're doing the light maintenance work, more typically slurry seals. Then you get into the blue streets. That's a heavier maintenance. So that's either slurry seals with more substantial dig outs or the rubberized cape seals. And that's okay to be doing both the light green and the blue in the same year. It's the same kind of contractor. But as you start drifting into the orange, the light rehab, it can become different kinds of work. So some of these streets may change as we do more detailed evaluation in the design phase. And then the red is the heavy rehab, that is heavier overlays, or what we call the mill and fill, the dig out of the existing road and replace it. We're showing Alcosta Boulevard here as a rehabilitation. That really means the heaviest level of asphalt work. In actuality, the design for Alcosta is showing a mix of work. The southbound and frontage lanes will likely be what would more be a heavy maintenance overlays of asphalt. The south end of the project might be able to get away with some slurry seals. And then the north end is in pretty bad shape and had a relatively thin pavement. So we're still going to see what that design will be, but it's much more likely to be a full rehab. So that's turning into a fairly expensive project. The rest of the maps really just break this down by year. So I'll go through that fairly quickly. Again, this is 2020, and you can see the two different types of projects that I was talking about. And really the orange is what is the 2020 project, and the green is the 2021 that we're trying to advance. Again, two different types of contractors. 2021 emphasizes the Alcosta Boulevard project. And again, that's the one that has the federal dollars associated with it from the grant. 2022, most of the work is getting back into the Doherty Valley area. We have some rehab work that we want to do on Bollinger Canyon Road. Bollinger Canyon has suffered some problems due to fill. There's also water getting into the pavement from the landscaping, and it needs some work. There's also some COP funding there to do bike lanes on it. So that's one that we're going to juggle around with the COP. And again, Crow is shown out here. Again, that's not the pavement management, but is the widening project. 2023, again, there's a little bit of a mix showing up here, but it's predominantly maintenance. 2024 shifts back into the Old Ranch area, and then again, there's a mix, and so we may find that we're splitting out into two different contracts, or maybe moving some things around timing wise. And 2025, again, is going back into the Doherty Valley and trying to get preventative maintenance done on the remaining streets out there. By the time 2025 is done, essentially all of the streets in Doherty Valley will have been treated. And that brings me back to the squiggly line chart. So this is just a different way of looking at how you can treat the pavement. The orange is really the operative line that we're working on. It doesn't show the little tick up on this graph that it would be associated with our TRIP funding, but more or less takes us from where we are now, and over the 5 years, we end up at about PCI 76. I think the important thing about this graph is to look at the differentials and the tremendous amount of money that is necessary to achieve relatively minor changes. So the difference between maintaining our PCI at 79 and the slow drop to 76 is about $2 million a year. These other lines up at the top, the blue and the green, are really just pie in the sky type of things. What does it take? Your so-called needs assessment that MTC likes to see is what would it take to keep your pavements in really good condition above that 80, and they show about a $41 million total cost to do this. The rising to 84 is again a pie in the sky number. To achieve that, you'd have to put in $5 million. You'd have to double the amount of money that we currently spend. So I think the biggest focus to me on this is the difference between keeping our PCI constant at around that 79 level and the current budget. That's about a $2.1 million differential. The grants and things that we get have, there are $1 million here or so in a year, and many years with none. So they typically represent over a 5-year period, maybe 10% of what we need to maintain our PCI at the current level. Now, of course, 79 is really quite a good number. Even a PCI of 75 or 76 is considered to be in the good range. So this is not something where we need to run out and immediately find a solution to the problem. On the other hand, as I said several times, the cheapest way to keep your pavement in good condition is keeping it in good condition from the get-go. But figuring out what the best step to fund the pavements are, that's something that takes a good deal of thought and consideration. There's multiple different ways that different jurisdictions go about this. So it's something that probably requires several years worth of thought to come up with the solution that we think is right for us and try and implement it. So with that, if you have any additional questions.
One thing I wanted to point out, and that is there's going to be a Costco gas station over in place of the Office Depot. Now, I did a quick survey around town. We have 12 gas stations around town with 122 pumps. The 32 pumps that Costco would put in would increase the number of pumps by 26%. Now, I'm the first to realize that you're not going to get a 26% increase because you're not going to get that many more new customers, because they're going to cannibalize some of the existing stations. But with a $2 million gas tax, even 15% is $300,000, or 20% would be $400,000. So I would expect that we will see a bump up by people that go to the Costco gas station that would have been buying gas outside of town, probably by at least 15%. So When that gas station opens, hopefully we'll see roughly a 300,000 or more bump up. That doesn't solve the problem, but as you know, every dollar helps. Whether that 300,000 you can put into curb cuts and other things, and save your money for pavement, however that goes. 300,000 isn't nothing, but it doesn't solve the problem either.
Yes.
So have we factored in kind of the overall budget that we walked through last couple of weeks ago into this, or this is projections from earlier?
It's been many years since we've actually put in general fund money into pavement. We haven't done that on a regular basis. When was the last time we put general fund money in, Robin?
I don't remember. It has been quite a few years. And of course, in the past, the pavement condition was very good, above 80.
Yeah.
And large swaths of the city essentially had new pavement. So there's very little need to do the maintenance on them. It would have been an unwise use of funds. So really a lot of what we see here in terms of the long-term downward trend is a consequence that the city almost doubled in size. That gave us a very high PCI while all of those streets were new. And at the same time, we gained an increased share in gas tax revenue associated with the increased population. But we didn't need to spend any of that money maintaining all of those streets because they were new. And so that effectively allowed, in a certain sense, a subsidy of the old part of town with those increased gas tax revenues to deal with older pavements. But now the Doherty Valley pavements are essentially at the same average condition as the pavements in the rest of the town. And so we're now all in the same boat, and the money needs to be spread throughout the town.
Brentwood's been a beneficiary. They've had a great PCI of late because they've been building a lot of new streets. And so 15, 20 years after those streets are paved, now they're part of the burden as opposed to part of the solution.
Yes, I was looking at some of the other cities do in this area, and I see that Dublin has a PCI of 84.
Right.
And of course, we know about all the development that's been going on there.
Yeah, it'll catch up with them.
It will catch up.
Is there anything in specific you want from the infrastructure committee on this?
I don't believe so at this time.
Okay, well, I believe that we want you to proceed with the plan as you presented it. The critical point method is key to helping us stay as high as possible. We don't want things dropping from 50 to 45. We want to catch them before they hit that. That's a real key one in my opinion. Is anything that's getting close to 50. It falls off that cliff at 50, the price goes way up. So that's one to pay attention to.
I will provide you with that additional information that you received, and as we receive information about potential impacts to funding from the current economic downturn,
Right.
we'll let you know about that. There are projections for reductions in the HUTA and SB1 funds beginning to come in. And that looks like we may be looking at an average reduction of about 20%.
$2 million.
So they're pretty substantial.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Robin.
Thank you.
Anything else, Sabina, on that?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Moving right along. So item 4.2, Doherty Valley Tree and Planting Management Plan. Gosh, this is where we miss our old buddy, but all right, new team. Where's Jeff when we need him? I know the new people are every bit as good as Jeff.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start up the PowerPoint presentation.
While Gary's starting up the PowerPoint presentation, just want to introduce the team. As we know, Jeff has been taking the lead, and Scott Renix is our division manager, but Sean and Gary, Sean is our program manager and Gary is our maintenance supervisor. He's also our arborist as well as our urban forester. So the team has really beefed up on their knowledge of tree management, and that's why they are presenting this presentation together.
Great, thanks.
All right, so we'll get into it. Start off with a little bit of background. On April 29th, 2019, staff provided a presentation overview of the 1920 AWP. Part of that was the Doherty Valley Tree and Planting Strip Management Plan. Infrastructure Committee and the public had several questions about the execution of the plan. Infrastructure Committee requested that staff address the AWP process and how it aligns with the outline in the plan and at a future meeting. The Infrastructure Committee recommended moving forward with funding the 1920 AWP. No funding was allocated with the 1920 budget approval. The 2019 Certificate of Participation funded $1.22 million to the project as part of the 1920 mid-year budget adjustment. And currently, no funding is being requested for the 2021 fiscal year. So jumping into the AWP process, Doherty Valley Tree and Planting Strip Management Plan includes a matrix and steps for staff to make consistent supported decisions on tree removal, avoiding costly damage and repairs. So our intent is to provide consistent landscaping in the community, techniques for staff to make finding-based decisions for each tree, and to keep maintenance practices that are consistent with the Doherty Valley Design Handbook. So the first step in the process is staff goes out and assess and inspects and evaluates each subdivision annually. We prioritize project areas based on severity of damage, size of planting strips, and recently the type of water used because of the issues with using potable water and recent droughts. So once we have submitted and got approval of the AWP plan, we begin the process by notifying homeowner associations, if applicable, outlining the work procedures planned for the neighborhood. In areas where subdivisions aren't represented by homeowner associations, notification letters are mailed out to individual addresses affected. So that's just an sample of the letter we send out. The next step was to do a site survey. We go out in conjunction with those decision-making matrices for developing tree retention, replacement, and removal. Following that assessment, we will go out and post notice of tree removal signs on each of the trees that are indicating reasons for removal. So that there's several reasons. It could be hazardous, close to the water meter, sewer damage. And then also on that notice, we'll be putting on the replacement species if it's appropriate for the site conditions. We also provide a QR code and contact information so the residents can contact us with any questions or concerns. This has proved to be one of the most important steps in the process. We give a 7-day waiting period approximately so that residents have the ability to communicate questions and concerns to staff about the project. This may be extended depending on discussions with the residents and to work through any concerns. The next step is to begin the tree removal process. So we contract with West Coast Arborists. They'll go out and submit USA tickets to clear for utilities at each of the removal sites. Then they'll proceed with removing the tree and stump, typically at the same time. This is followed up with turf removal. So one of the major causes of the surface root damage was because turf was planted in these park strips. So turf is removed from the entire strip. At that time, the soil is also remediated to perform and reduce compaction, improve the soil permeability and soil quality in preparation for planting replacement trees and ground cover. The next step will be planting. So we plant trees that are used in the Appendix 3 on page 23 of the plan, as well as the ground cover species that are outlined in the plan. Again, we put these in our notification letters and on the postings so that residents are well informed about what species are going back in these locations. And then in order to comply with some of the new California water ordinances, specifically WELO or WELO, the Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, part of that in the plan calls out for us to convert the irrigation system from overhead spray to individual bubblers for each tree and ground cover plant. And then finally, the last step in the process is we apply mulch to the park strip during the establishment period. So we use a mahogany brown mulch that's applied at about 2 to 3 inch depth. And that's the basic last step of the process.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Gary. I'm going to be talking about what we've completed so far in the annual work projects. I'm going to be talking about some resident feedback, the new annual work plan for 2021, and some potential cost savings to cover some of the costs for doing this Doherty Valley Tree Project. So first, as you can see, we have a map that shows the completed projects from 2017 to 2020. If you look at it, and Doherty Valley, it's approximately about 5% of the total area of Doherty Valley that we've completed so far, which that seems like a low number for what we've done for 3 years, but that's reality. And these are the list of the areas that we've done. Number of tree removals, we removed 616 trees. We've done 509 replacements, and we've removed almost 300,000 square feet of turf in both potable and reclaimed water. Just as a number, it's the replacement tree factor is about 83% replacements for removals. Here's some of the resident feedback that we get. During implementation of the annual work plan, staff provides residents the opportunity to voice questions or concerns before any work begins. Common questions staff encounter includes the following. Will my tree be removed? Why is my tree not being removed? Can I keep my tree? Can the roots be cut? What type of replacement tree will be used? What size will it be? How big will it get? Why is the turf being removed? What type of plants will replace the turf? Will the sidewalk be prepared after the tree removal? Will my water meter box be repaired? So that's the most frequent questions we get from residents during this process. As you see here, this is the graph that shows, or the box that shows the 2021 annual work plan. We still have a few items to finish from the 1920. We have subdivisions 7984 to complete and 8773, which will complete before we actually start the 21 annual work plan if it's approved. And if you look in the box below, it shows the estimated removals, the estimated replacements, and roughly the turf conversion or the removal of turf for each area. And then no additional funding is needed since the COP funding wasn't received until March of 2020.
So Sean, I know this because it's my street. Aspenwood is not listed here, but I think the work is half done because it had to they had to stop working on it. Are those streets in here which were like halfway there, and because of COVID, we had to stop work on those?
Gary, you have that one?
Yeah, so we did stop the all construction process, but with the newest order allowing construction to start up again, we've actually started the irrigation portion right now, and we'll be resuming all the landscape portion next week. So we anticipate to have that project completed before the end of this fiscal year. So there shouldn't be any rollover into the next annual work plan.
Okay. Because yeah, it's kind of, I think they put in the pipes and everything, and that's where they had to leave it.
Yeah.
And
So we'll probably be following up shortly with mulch, just because of the amount of weed growth we got with the stoppage of the project.
yeah.
Okay. So here's a couple other sites for potential savings. We did show you this at the last infrastructure meeting. Albion Road, there's approximately 60,000 square feet, 1.36 acres of turf that can be removed. Potential water savings each year would be roughly $17,224. The maintenance savings just for the turf mowing is roughly $6,000 a year. All this money could be put back into continuing this process in the neighborhoods. These are all these that we're showing you for potential savings are arterial roads, nothing in front of residents' homes. Another one is East Branch Parkway. Turf is approximately 90,000 square feet, 2 acres. Your water savings is approximately $25,425 per year. Your maintenance on turf mowing is roughly $8,700 per year.
So in how many years do we recover this? Because there's going to be cost of that turf as well, right?
What's that? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Sorry, the cost of the replacing that.
Yeah, so basically what we're talking about is removing the turf and just leaving it mulch.
Mhm.
And really our ultimate plan is if we continue the project like we are, once the neighborhoods are done, we will be going back to some of these arterial roads and possibly planting these. When we're definitely showing a cost savings just in the mowing and the water for now.
Mhm.
If we go back with no turf and put in the ground cover and convert the irrigation, there still will be a cost savings, but obviously not as much as this, because we will be continuing to water and there will be some maintenance, not as much as turf mowing. So it's about half roughly.
Half of what is up here?
So say for instance, this next slide that you see, our water savings would be $53,000 a year.
Mhm.
So if we went back at the end of the project, which we're talking several years from now, and we went back and we planted ground cover in these areas, you're talking, let's say half of that water bill would be for plants instead of turf grass, obviously, because you don't need to water it as much.
Okay.
And your maintenance is going to be probably cut in half just because they don't have to mow each week. They're just on a general, weed pulling and pruning of the shrubs to keep it off the sidewalk and off the curb.
And are we using mostly pretty much all recycled water, or it's a mix?
Probably 95% of Dorothy Valley is recycled water now.
Okay.
Because they just, prime example is over by Coyote Crossing Park. That whole neighborhood was converted within the last 2 or 3 years. So all that's really left is Ivy Hill, that area by Piccadilly, and then going down Windermere towards Tassajara, which we've already removed all the turf there.
I would like to add though that with recycled water, the price, there isn't much difference from potable water. Additionally, with there being so much development and the use of reclaimed water has become so prevalent that oftentimes the water provider is running out of reclaimed water during the hotter months of the year.
Okay, so here's one of the bigger ones, Windermere. The turf is 183,000 square feet, roughly 4.21 acres. Your water savings potentially could be 53,000 a year. And your maintenance for turf mowing is roughly 18,000 per year. So like I said, a lot of these areas, there's some good cost savings here, potential savings to continue this project. And I think, some of these arterials you're looking at a 40 or 50 mile an hour landscape roadway that a lot of people driving by won't see. I mean, people walking will see it, but hopefully they look at the landscape on the other side of it.
Do we have a plan to replace these trees as well? Is that
right now? No, we're looking at everything right now. We're looking at is strictly in the neighborhoods in front of people's homes.
Okay.
If there's a dead tree or a tree that's covering a light or, on a utility and causing damage, we do look at those individuals, but overall, we look at mostly just the neighborhoods.
Okay.
Do the utilities manage some of these trees and their upkeep? The ones that are, no,
Nope.
they don't do anything?
They don't help us at all. This is kind of on us. All right, Gary. This is Infield Street. This is an area that's not in front of the homes. It's actually across the street, and it backs up to a sports park, and there's like an open space trail there. We've always had a problem with, if you can look at the grass, it looks horrible. We've always had a problem with ground squirrels and everything in this area. So we're proposing to take out this one side and mulch the one side, and then leaving the stuff in front of the homes on the other side of the street for now. Once again, this is about 10,000 square feet, $2,900 in savings and water, and another $1,000 for mowing maintenance. So here's the next step. Staff will continue implementing the proposed 2021 annual work plan with feedback from Committee Incorporated. Notification of the AWP will be sent to HOAs and affected residents. Work will be scheduled and coordinated with the city's contractors and progress according to the plan as funds are available. Staff will develop a new AWP each year during the city's annual budget development and approval process. Well, basically, that's the end of my talk. Any questions?
For future presentations, because we're going to do one of these every year, I like the fact that you gave us a summary at the beginning as to how many trees and how much turf have been taken care of. Could you also give us an accumulated cost? How much have we spent as of the end of, pick a day, but how much will we have spent by the end of this fiscal year or next fiscal year? I'd like to know, when we reach, $7 million and $12 million. One time we were talking, this project's going to be a $20 million project, and I suspect it probably will be. But I'd like to kind of keep track as to how we're spending the money. How much money have we spent at that time?
Okay, so
completely separate. Have there been any cases where the resident is really, really resistant to removal of the tree?
In most cases, no. So what I think the biggest thing with this project that we do is it's more of a personal approach. So what we do is if we get a resident, say we get an email or we get a phone call saying, okay, we really don't want to remove our tree, we actually set up a site visit. We go meet with the resident and we show them basically the problems and why we're looking at removing the tree. And I would probably say almost 100% of the time, once we go do that and show them the problems and they understand why we're doing it and the whole process, we really have not had any problems with removing their trees.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple of emails from people who said they were going to tie themselves to the trees, and they did. I think I forwarded that email on, and after staff talked to them, they said, "Yeah, we understood why you're doing it, but we're still not happy that this is being done."
Oh,
so I know there are certainly disgruntled people out there who are not very happy with some of the trees.
I don't think there's a happy person on staff or in the council about this. It's a huge cost. It's a huge disruption. It changes the character of the neighborhood. There is no upside except it will mitigate damage in the future and it will reduce costs in the future. I'm still pissed at the county for not following the plan that was agreed to. And that's the real crux of the problem is they ended up planting trees in spaces that was inappropriate and they put in ground cover that was inappropriate. And that's on the county, but there's not much we can do about it today.
So they deviated from the plan itself?
Yes. Is that right, Maria? And Joe?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
yes, that is correct.
Yeah, they deviated from the plan. If they had followed the plan, I don't know if 100% of the problem goes away, but a large fraction of this problem goes away. It's I don't know, 10 or 20% of the problem as opposed to what we're facing today. Well, we're
Just
going through effectively every single neighborhood.
Yeah, it's part of the committee. We explored everything. But I would add though that, you know, the team that's assembled at Public Works, this is not we're not replacing it with things with poor quality landscaping or, you know, so it's not like this is going to end up a bad thing. Certainly there's significant costs and it's troubling. We have to do it to save infrastructure and things like that. But our public works staff, they're going in, we have tree experts going in, we're planting beautiful trees in replacement trees and putting in beautiful landscaping. And so though it may not be what is currently there, I don't anticipate it destroying the whole nature of the community. Now you're going to put a younger tree in probably, so it'll take a few more years to grow and get mature and things like that. But kind of the thought that it is we're settling for something worse, you know, I don't know if that's actually the case. It's just we have to do something with this infrastructure. We have to take some stuff out. We have to put in some new trees that are appropriate, some the same trees, but all these trees ultimately will mature and you know, provide a beautiful landscape as before, only kind of different. And I would give examples like some of our center medians. If you look at, we've done some really cool stuff with when we've had to get rid of some of our really high water center medians, and some of our planning folks in our public works that came in and they took all that center median stuff out all throughout the city. I'm not talking Doherty Valley, and replaced it with a completely really different design. But after that grew, I've had just tremendous numbers of folks saying how beautiful and how much they prefer it. So it's tough, but you know, I think ultimately at the end of the day, we'll have a pretty satisfactory product.
If you want a really good example of that, it's out Bollinger near 2401. If you go out there by Marsh and those streets out there, they replaced what was lawn and olive trees, and that's all there really was. And they took out the lawns, they left the olive trees and put in some other stuff, and it looks fabulous. It looks far better than it did when it was just lawn.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think it may have been Jeff, or I'm giving him too much credit, but Jeff managed that project and it came out wonderful. And so if you want a good example, go out there by 2401 on Bollinger. As you leave Bollinger, as you leave 2401 headed Bollinger towards Memorial Park and that area, that landscaping is fabulous.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So are we going with more natives as well, as we're replacing these and low, you know, plants that require low water, as we're putting some of that ground cover?
Correct. As we're putting this ground cover in, we are going with a lower water. I mean, no matter what, once you take the turf out, you're already cutting your water in half. I mean, the first year, I wouldn't say in half the first year, but after the first year, once these plants are in there, you're ultimately reducing your water by half once they're established.
In addition,
That might be sorry, go ahead, Gary.
in addition to with the irrigation conversion, you're losing a lot less water due to overspray or wind drift. So it's actually being applied to the plants themselves.
So that might be an additional tracking that we can do for you, Councilmember Perkins, for you know, you wanted a cumulative cost to remove and do what we're doing. You might want to see a cumulative savings tracking as well to get a good idea.
Yes, that would be very helpful. Great. Proceed until apprehended.
Perfect.
Any last comments, Sabina?
I think we love our trees here too much.
You're absolutely right. And it's a hard thing to watch somebody take a chainsaw to something that's been in front of your house. I know that is. But that's where we are.
Well, and I think that's where both Sean and Gary, they have an immense passion for what they're doing, and the amount of work that they do to work with each and every resident to have them understand. So they may not be happy, but they understand and are educated. And because of the background that Gary has in horticulture and Sean, his experience in all these years, and Scott as well, Scott Renix, actually, he's the one that managed the Bollinger Median project. Just like the city manager said, that there's a lot of thought that is put to getting these subdivisions to look beautiful and what the residents want. So their feedback is extremely important to us, which is why we have these noticing procedures. And they probably know Gary and Sean's name. And when they walk through Doherty Valley, they know them by person and they have no problem with it.
Just to echo what Maria mentioned, it's really important that you look at the process as Sean described. You know, cities don't normally do the depth. I mean, we are going to the very nth degree to communicate and work with city residents on city-owned trees, right? So to the point where we've even had the original task force, or whatever we called that, the tree committee, that met for weeks on end to come up with a plan. And so I would challenge anybody that has a more comprehensive and responsive plan anywhere around. So I'm very proud of that. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but you know, the fact that the way we post it and the way our staff will go out and have in-person, you know, discussions with residents to help explain, I think we're doing everything we can do.
Yeah, well, I appreciate, Gary and Sean, everything you're doing. I'm just also bringing up that I have had disgruntled emails, and so I forwarded them over to Maria as well, and she's aware. So you're on mute.
People have quit sending me those kinds of emails, so they're sending them to you now. That's great. Any last comments about this?
I think we're good. Just moving forward, we'll talk about the optional sites, and then moving forward with 2021.
Yes, please. I'd like you to do the optional sites to the extent you have budget to do that, and guidance from your city manager. Do those things as quickly as possible. The savings will accumulate. This isn't going to be a year of water rationing. I don't perceive from the water agencies, but they weren't happy with the snow melt or the snow accumulation this year. So, this may be the first year of one bad year, or maybe the first year of 5 bad years. We don't know. So anything we can do to save water will pay dividends.
Perfect.
Okay, with that, any other committee member comments unrelated to what we've been discussing? Got anything, Sabina?
No, nothing right now.
Okay. 6 is unfinished business and 7 is adjournment. Thanks, everybody. Maria and all your staff out there, and Robin and everybody, thanks so much. Good meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.